Welcome to the Rethink Vertical podcast. The episode today is sponsored by the UAS Cluster Initiative. My guest today is Daniel Plaisance. Daniel leads the Advanced Air Mobility portfolio at Tulsa Innovation Labs, a philanthropic economic development organization based in Tulsa, Oklahoma. In his role, Daniel oversees program development and strategic initiatives in research and development, testing infrastructure, and workforce development initiatives that build upon Tulsa's regional competitive advantage in aerospace and advanced air mobility. Recently, Daniel spearheaded the development of 3 projects for Tulsa Innovation Labs as part of the Tulsa region's Build Back Better Regional Challenge application, which was selected by the U.S. Economic Development Administration as one of the 21 winning applications from over 529 initial applicants, resulting in $70 million in funding to develop a world-class advanced mobility ecosystem in Tulsa. Daniel's a good friend and incredibly well-read in all things UAS and advanced air mobility. I hope you enjoy the episode. All right, Daniel, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
It's been great to get to know you over the last 18 months now, 2 years, how long it's been. Kind of working in the same ecosystem. So glad we finally have a chance to do it in a recorded manner, so folks can hear some of the interesting things going on in the region. But before we do that, for those that don't know you or haven't met you before, it'd be good to kind of share a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in this interesting industry at this interesting time.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Daniel Plaisance. I'm the portfolio manager for the UAS and AAM portfolio at an organization called Tulsa Innovation Labs. So Tulsa Innovation Labs, we're an economic development organization. We're a nonprofit, and we focus on building the next generation industries within the Tulsa region and northeastern Oklahoma more broadly. A little bit of my personal background. I come out of the economic development world, so a relative newcomer to aviation and UAS and AAM. Most of my history has been in working to develop strategies for specific tech industries and how they can grow in specific regions. And when you think about that, really, it is looking what industries make sense in what places. How can cities and regions and states really coordinate their investments to grow workforce, to grow business attraction, to grow the talent and the expertise and the R&D and the testing assets and all that stuff that we'll talk about within a specific region.
Yeah. So you economic development background, and I think it's interesting. I'm meeting more and more previous economic developers ending up in the aerospace industry. And I think it's interesting because if you look back, growing companies, growing regions, using the aerospace industry as a catalyst is kind of something we've seen before in regions, but from building companies and startups, it's kind of a new thing. I'm curious, before we kind of go down that path, when Tulsa Innovation Labs started to think about industries that were important, some of those verticals that are important, UAS, AAM, emerging aerospace rose to the level of consideration. First, how did that happen? And second, why aerospace for the Tulsa region?
Yeah, sure. So when you think about traditional economic development, what a lot of people think of are tax incentives to attract a big factory or to incentivize residential or commercial development, building stadiums downtown, that kind of thing. Yeah. And that really has, especially for cities, driven the day for decades now, where that has been the main thrust of their economic development strategies. And a lot of the results really focus on that. What we do at Tulsa Innovation Labs is a little bit different, and it's part of a bigger national trend to really expand economic development, to think about specific industries and really the diversification of regions that have a concentration in legacy industries. So in the Tulsa region, that's oil and gas and energy traditionally, as well as a lot of heavy manufacturing here. And when we think about what comes next, right, for Tulsa, what does the next century, if oil and gas has been the last century, what does the next century look like? You really need to get more creative and more strategic about where you're making your investments. So Tulsa Innovation Labs was founded about 4 years ago to really set the strategy for the region around what do we think our industries are, right? What do we think our future,
Right.
where do we think our future lies? And we launched a research project actually to try and identify that. Now, a couple of principles guiding us, right? The first is you want to obviously invest in an industry that's growing. You want to invest in an industry that is a good fit with your region. And you want to invest in an industry that you can really develop a kind of critical mass of talent and a reputation for, right? So the examples I always give with this are, okay, look at the UAS and AAM industry. It's growing. It's the biggest period, I would say, of innovation in decades and decades, maybe
Yeah.
half a century, currently with the rise of electrification and autonomy and connected systems, and then all these smaller aircraft and airframes that are doing things really a whole different category of technology and uses than we've had before. So there's a ton of opportunity, right? And we're in that early part of the growth curve where we can really expect it to continue. At the same time, it's a relatively new industry. It's an exciting industry. It's a growing industry, but there are not incumbent regions that are really dominating it, right? So I joke with my colleagues. We have a lot of finance and financial technology in the Tulsa region,
Mm-hmm.
mostly to service the energy industry. But if we try and compete and become a financial technology hub, we're going to get blown out of the water by New
Right.
York. Right, New York will get 90% of it, and everyone else gets to fight over the last 10. So we really think about this as geographically contestable. So a region like Tulsa can get more than its fair share and build a real specialty. It may not stay that way for a long time, right? But at least for the moment, the winners are not yet clear, and it's a good space to compete in. And then the reason we think we can compete in it is really based on the assets that exist here already. So I mentioned oil and gas and energy. Oklahoma's second biggest industry is in aerospace and aviation. So the Tulsa region has massive MRO presence, massive manufacturing presence and of components as well as OEMs. We have a history of a sort of legacy of military aviation and aerospace work as well. And you look at that and you say, okay, that is a foundation on which we can build a new industry. That talent, those corporate assets, the experts that are driving innovation in those areas, they're here in the region. And as we look towards the future, that positions us really well to compete in the next generation of these technologies because we're not starting from scratch.
Right. Yeah. No, I think you're spot on with the that foundational um, capability, and then the trick now is how do you integrate and merge this new sort of technology and use the existing as sort of a framework and structure to build upon that. Because I think what I've noticed too in traditional aviation is folks kind of get stuck in the way they do things, the way they think about aviation, and so there's that time period where now we call it UAS and AAM, and in 10 years it'll just be aviation and aerospace like everything else. But we haven't quite gotten there yet. MRO will exist for all of those things, right? Not just traditional aviation. So thanks for a really interesting concept. I want to jump back real quick. I mentioned you being an outsider to the aviation industry and kind of getting dropped in the deep end. What as you've over the last 3 or 4 years kind of worked through watching this industry start to emerge and grow, what's been one of the more challenging things to kind of really wrap your head around, or maybe one of the struggles, or maybe one of the things that people don't quite understand that you think would be helpful for folks to
Yeah, it's
know?
interesting. It really gets back, I think, a little bit to what I was saying before. Aviation in every aspect is an industry with a lot of entrenched incumbents, right?
Mm.
You have massive airlines, massive OEMs, obviously really robust and sophisticated supply chains, but it is not a particularly fast changing or quickly moving industry. And that really clashes, I think, a lot with the ethos of technology, right? You have a lot of technology founders from other industries coming into aviation and building companies, and those without an aviation pedigree or a co-founder that has an aviation pedigree
Right.
are really struggling.
Yeah.
And I think it reflects a culture of aviation and aerospace that is not necessarily at odds with tech, but it certainly is not exactly in line with some of the tech ethos that you think of. Really, what brought this home for me is we had an event here, a conference in October of 2023 called the Tram Summit, and had a keynote address by Billy Nolan, who is now with Archer Aviation, was the interim FAA administrator for about a year and a half or two, if I recall correctly, and has had a long career in aviation and aviation safety in particular. And hearing him talk about the level of sophistication involved in certification, in management of airspace, all of that, just the level of depth of research, of management, of air traffic control, right? The tens and hundreds of thousands of people who are involved every day in making the American aviation industry the safest in the world by far it's really incredible, right? And it's a marvel in some sense of technology and data processing and management and systems and all of that. But on the other hand, that's obviously a very difficult incumbent to change and to try and disrupt. So I think we are moving towards, even since I've been involved in the industry, we're moving quickly towards a period where you have kind of the critical mass really beginning to form around developing and certifying and deploying some of these new technologies. But it's been fascinating to see what that looks like from the outside. And maybe for regions, for companies, it also favors incumbents going forward. There will be a next generation of incumbents of the places that have the resources to do that well, right? We're not in a place currently where that's the reality for the UAS and the AAM industry, but we may get back there once this next wave of innovation is gone. So the payoff for really being first and winning is extremely high.
Yeah. I was just thinking about, my background coming to it from the, living in the regulated world and traditional aviation and understanding conceptually that there's fierce competition in traditional aviation. However, there's forced collaboration and forced, information and data sharing because everybody has to participate in a government-run national airspace system. And what's interesting now is we're seeing this new sort of ecosystem that is being developed that's kind of still requires oversight by regulatory agencies and governance, but yet is much more private industry focused. And so there's this tension going on. It's the regulatory agency saying, all right, everyone, we want to build this. This is still a safety system, so there's requirements, but we know a lot of you are still competing to see who's going to win. But you also need to work together to help us figure out how to make the system run. It's like there's all these dichotomies that are working against each other. And the airlines do it, right? The airlines do it now. They're all competing against each other, but they also have to work together or the system doesn't run and then no one is successful, right? And so it has been interesting to talk to technology founders with no traditional aviation experience saying, we just need to make the best product to find the most customers and win, but convincing them that they have to do that with some level of collaboration with their other competitors or the system will never be developed, right? You can't create this product that you want to create can't be created in a bubble, and you're going to have to figure out how to compete in a system and collaborate at the same time. So it's a really difficult thing to figure out.
Yeah, and add into that, there are incumbents and a handful of players, right, in the traditional airline and aviation industry who are really operating there. The reality we're moving towards with UAS and AAM is dozens or maybe hundreds of certified operators doing a variety of use cases, right, with a variety of varying degrees of autonomy, different operating environments, different goals, right? So it's really an entire added dimension, I think. It's not really expanding upon the model that exists currently. as much as adding an entire new level of complexity. And I think that that's going to continue to be a challenge, honestly, for this industry as it grows. From where we sit, though, that presents an opportunity. So we have developed, we're really looking to be among the best destinations and places where companies can come pilot their technology, they can come test their systems, integrate their systems, and really demonstrate their ability to be collaborative, be safe outside of a laboratory environment, and really in a complex real world. So a couple of the programs we've developed over the last couple of years, just as an example, one of them, the Skyway Range, is a beyond visual line of sight testing corridor that is located right on the urban boundary of Tulsa. So we're about 4 miles from downtown Tulsa at that asset, about 6 or 7, if I recall correctly, from Tulsa International Airport. But going to the northwest there, we have very, very rural Osage County, right? So extremely rural, hills and farmland and that sort of environment. Turning 180 degrees, you have the urban downtown, 450,000 person city, a million person metro area. And that really, I think, illustrates the dichotomy of complexity of the airspace, of the different level of safety and level of certification that is likely going to be required to operate in those different airspaces. And as the industry matures, we view ourselves as in a great position to help sort of with those next several steps of integration and technology development here in the Tulsa region. Similarly, building on a program currently that's in development that really focuses on securing the communications and the data exchanges and providing the environment for various operators and various companies to work together and collaborate and really build out the system that's required to make this a reality and achieve the kind of scale that's going to be required to make this work.
Yeah, so you're referring to the recent Tech Hubs designation for Tulsa, and that was really focused around that secure autonomy concept, which I think a lot of folks are thinking about. A lot of folks are thinking about highly autonomous systems, the large amounts of data that are required to be exchanged. What kind of processes and systems will have to be set up to both allow for that rapid data exchange? Also, how do we secure it? How do we ensure we protect it from cyber attacks? All these things that every company and any technology industry is thinking about. But now you're talking about doing that within a safety system, right? So it's one thing if your computer goes down or your internet goes down, and you got to go back to board games. Another thing if you're delivering people and packages and the system goes down, and then what happens, right? And we see in traditional aviation how impactful not just an attack of some sort would be, but just loss of data feeds. If you're at the airport waiting to go to your airplane and I won't name airlines, but a specific airline's reservation system goes down. It doesn't have to be a safety critical system, but it can still shut the system down completely. So those are the kind of things that will be interesting and hopefully, some of the things that can be learned through some of those projects that you're talking about. I think Tulsa is a perfect place to start some of those studies and hopefully help both industry and the regulators figure out how to make this all work.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right, and really perfectly in line with the direction we're thinking about. So, Oklahoma State University, as you know, has a long history of excellence in autonomous systems, in airspace and aerospace and aviation, in UAS in particular. They're working on everything from counter UAS Center of Excellence with Department of Defense and Department of Homeland Security to a lot of the commercial work that's going on at the Choctaw Nation and really across the state. They've set themselves up as real leaders in the technology and the regulation and really the whole system for this. And we supplement that actually with cybersecurity, which is another one of our focus areas here, building on real unique assets at the University of Tulsa, which has an excellent legacy and level of expertise in cybersecurity, specifically for cyber physical systems and IoT devices and things of that nature. We view the intersection of those two institutions and their expertise as a great opportunity to really pioneer and lead this. You made a great point. Cybersecurity often is looked at as a patch job, right? It's something where you're trying to limit your liability, right? You're trying to make sure you don't get blamed. You're setting up a system, and then people are identifying holes and identifying bugs, and you're sort of patching them as you go. That's not going to work for aviation or
Right.
autonomous systems, right? I mean, the difference between you losing your files or having some data corrupted and a drone being hacked or a data feed being disrupted that's causing crashes or something like that. I mean, this is a choke point for this industry. It's something that's going to need to be ironclad and airtight before we really see, I think, the widespread deployment of these systems. We're seeing a ton of interest in that from everyone from AUVSI, who we're partnering with closely on some of this, as well as to the military and government side that's really viewing this as a top area of concern.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a critical point too. When you think about something as simple as you talked about hundreds of companies as opposed to 7 to 9 large major airlines. Now you're talking about hundreds of companies, and a couple things. How do they communicate with each other? Who's forcing them to communicate with each other, and in what way? And how can they learn to trust each other? Because everybody's very protective of their proprietary data. But so from the airline side, it's right. The airlines have a level of proprietary data that they won't share, but they've had to develop over time sources of information that they do share and are forced to share, or the system doesn't work. And so, we haven't even started to scratch the surface of how do these separate companies learn to just share data, right? Share location data, share, all kinds of weather data, all these things that are going to be critical.
And I think that there's a tendency sometimes within the industry to think of these as frustrations, right? And they certainly are, right? I mean, I think that there's a lot of difficult systems and a lot of tough work that's still to be done to enable this. From where we sit, though, right, we think this is really an opportunity. We think that to do this right and do this right early is going to be absolutely critical towards public trust and public safety, right? The last thing that you want is to have a failed sort of initial rollout. Not that we're really in the initial rollout phase, right? But it only takes a few big incidents to really start to put the brakes on this industry. So we think that the companies that are setting themselves up for success are those that are really thinking about this on the front end, and they're investing their time and really developing their systems with safety and not just safety, but security in mind as well.
Yeah, so true. Well, I'm a little biased, but I'm very excited to see kind of where the Oklahoma and Tulsa ecosystem moves, and excited to see some of these projects come online and get some momentum. And I think we'll have to revisit this conversation 18 to 24 months from now and talk about all the new things that are happening and some of those opportunities that we're able to take advantage of. But I know you've got a lot going on personally, so I do appreciate you taking the time to chat, and look forward to seeing TIL become more successful and the industry at large become more successful in the region. So
we've got a lot of great stuff in the pipeline, and appreciate the collaboration with UAS Cluster Initiative is really helping us think through some of this and support the growth of the industry here in the region, and then also expand a lot of what we're learning to across the country and bring a lot of those lessons back here. So it's been a great collaboration, and we're really excited for the next couple of years.
All right. Well, thanks, Daniel. If you'd like to be a part of the UAS Cluster Initiative community and get access to more of our content, check us out at www.uascluster.com.